What's going on, Whisper Nation? It's Wednesday, May 19th, and we are back at it today, and we're starting a new series. We're going to be breaking down all the divisions in football. Yes, every single one, not on today's show, but over the course of the next couple of episodes. And today, we're lucky enough to start with the AFC North. We're going to be talking Baltimore, we're going to be talking Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, right here on the Fantasy Whispers.
Right here.
What's up, Whisper Nation? That's right. Johnny told you what's going on, but if you're seeing my face, hearing my voice, seeing my voice, or hearing my face, do us a huge favor and hit the like button. Let us know how we can continue to keep growing this channel, but I'll let you know right now. You just got to share it on whatever platform you're on. Hit us with a like, hit us with a subscribe. Those algorithms are exactly what we need to grow this channel and keep bringing you fantasy football content every single day. If you're new to the Fantasy Whispers, welcome. Hit us with that follow, as I just said. And remember that you can go to thefantasywhispers.com, our Facebook, our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify. All those links are right there on thefantasywhispers.com. So hit us up. Johnny, we're doing it. We're starting with the AFC North today. So that'll be exciting. Some big names over there, of course. This is a tough division, maybe one of the toughest in the NFL. And a lot of people picking the Browns to maybe surprise win it. The Steelers won last year on what people thought was a soft schedule. You've got Baltimore in there just being usually one of the top contenders in the league. And then, of course, Cincinnati has Joe Burrow and all that stuff working and rock and rolling. We're going to dive into every fantasy relevant storyline within the division, players that we're looking at. We're going to look at ADPs. We're going to look at production last year and all those things. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about fantasy bust. Johnny, you have a question of the day for us.
Well, I did want to, before we get into that question of the day, I do want to say to those that are joining us now in this live stream, we are going, normally we go live an hour from now. It's normally at 3 p.m. Pacific time and 6 p.m. Eastern time, but we are going live earlier today. One, because we're excited to get the show out, and two, because right after we will be jumping over to Club Fantasy FFL's channel. We'll be going live with them. We're going to do a mock draft with them and on their channel. So that would be a lot of fun. So please bear with us on the time change today, and we're going to get a great show, Travis. I will start with this question. You teased it, but I want to know who is a fantasy player who is a bust that you can never forgive, because we have fantasy players that bust all the time. And, sometimes we make excuses for them on why they, what happened to them and how they can overcome it the next year. And sometimes they do, they have a bounce back season. But what is a player that just busted for you and you were like, nope, that's it. I'm done. It's over with. I'm never touching them again.
Well, I mean, there's some that just burn so bad and then they're out of the league. I mean, Eddie Lacy is one that comes to mind for me.
Feast mode.
That is somebody that Cheeseburger Eddie was not able to get it done. And so we're really, that one's a big one. I think we talked a little bit yesterday about a guy named Ryan Matthews for the Eagles and the Chargers. He was a guy that was kind of a perennial guy that we thought should break out. We got Austin in here, said Chad Ochocinco with the Pats.
That's a good one.
There's some big ones there.
Oh, I was scarred. I thought about this one, and I thought I'll give my answer after you give your final answer. But for a second I was like, oh, I should go with the Mike Gillislee one, because the Mike Gillislee one burned me hard. I was super into it, but at the same time it was like he didn't have enough fantasy relevance after that in order for me to be like, oh, I would bought in again to get like there was never an opportunity. So that's why I would say I would never forgive him. I would forgive him. He gave me 2 good games. So that wouldn't be my answer. But I want to know what is your favorite answer?
I think Eddie Lacy is the biggest one for me, just because it was my first time in our league of record getting a top 5 pick. I drafted Eddie Lacy with the 3rd overall or 4th overall pick. I can't really remember. He played for my Green Bay Packers, and he was just a disappointment all season long. But really put that weight on, and really just wasn't able to make it happen. And as a big guy, I sympathize with him, but fantasy football doesn't care about your sympathy or your emotion. It cares about if you can play the game, and Eddie Lacy just proved he couldn't anymore.
Yeah, that one was really, really unfortunate, because I was a fan of Eddie Lacy. But when he was like a beast mode Eddie Lacy, not feast mode. My guy that I would ultimately go with would have to be Jeremy Hill. And that is because he popped off at the end of his rookie season. You remember, like, Gio Bernard was there. He was the starter. He got injured. Then in comes Jeremy Hill, and this rookie like blew away. I mean, he was built. He was massive. Like, he was super built. And then so I bought in completely the next season. I was like, this guy is a workhorse running back, has everything. I wasn't afraid of Gio. I knew he would take the pass work, whatever. I was okay with that. And then it was just like I got mega burned by him. And so never again. And I'll be honest with you, Travis, before we move on to this next segment, because I know we got to, but I'm really surprised we got Austin in here watching this. And I'm surprised he didn't put Trent Richardson. Although he might have had Trent when he blew up and not when he blew out of the league, I should say.
Trent Richardson was one that was a big one for sure. Matt coming in with Big Trust. We trust. We will be talking about the Baltimore Ravens shortly. But yeah, those are just some big names that really hurt you, that were going at the top of drafts, that just really could not put it together. You know who else I think about is Martavis Bryant. Remember, Martavis Bryant would show us flashes all the time and just could not stay on the field. You could talk about that with Josh Gordon as well, as a guy who, kind of flunked out after the one incredible season. So there's just a lot of stuff going on with off the field that can come into play. Off the field, whether it's drugs or food or whatever it is, it can get you, it can sneak up on you.
Josh Gordon was just heartbreaking because every time I was just like, dude, please just stay off the weed. You're so talented.
Yeah.
But unfortunately.
And then they changed the weed policy right after. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens with Gordon, what happens with his reinstatement.
Let us know. Let us know, Whisper Nation. What is your favorite one?
We did ask in the comments here, so we'll get hopefully people popping off in those DMs and letting us know who their favorite bust is that they can never forgive. But we're going to talk a little bit about this AFC North. Before we get into that, Whisper Nation, I just want to remind you that we are nothing without your guys' unwavering support. We're so proud of this community we've built with you guys together. We got the Discord chat popping off. That link is in the bio or in the chat right there. But if you feel it upon your heart to help us continue to grow the family and chase this dream, consider joining us over at patreon.com. You can show support at the $10, $5, and even $1 levels. Anything really helps us out over there. Patron benefits include access to our exclusive Discord channels, entries to sports card giveaways, increased odds on our landing spot for a landing spot in our 2021 Listener League, and bonus fantasy content, which is only available to our patrons. Head on over to patreon.com/the Fantasy Whispers today and join the nation. Johnny, we talked about Big Trust from Matt. He popped it up here. He said, Big Trust, in Big Trust we trust. So let's talk a little bit about Big Trust. The Baltimore Ravens, well, they're the first ones on our list here, Johnny. And you kind of broke down the film here and looked back at their year last year and some of these players and start at the top there with Lamar Jackson, what Baltimore's all about.
Yeah, so Baltimore, when you're looking and breaking down their team, look, no team in the NFL ran more than the Baltimore Ravens. We do know that. We also know that the Ravens are a league low in passing rate over the last 2 years, or since 2019 when Lamar took over, at 45%. So it's not looking super great for the pass catchers here. But on the other side, for the running backs, we've always been really interested. And then, I'll start with Lamar Jackson and his outcome. Listen, he was a major disappointment last year for a lot of players who drafted him, most likely in the second round of drafts. Maybe you got him in the third, but sincerely, like, he wasn't able to perform to the quarterback standards that you drafted him to. He had just over 2,700 passing yards. He had 26 passing touchdowns, which was a significant regression from his prior MVP year. He had 9 interceptions, which was a career high. He did have over 1,000 rushing yards once again on 159 rushing attempts, which is very significant, which makes him the Konami code, right? He did have 7 rushing touchdowns as well, which fantasy players really like. He's had 2 straight years of over 1,000 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. And so you like the floor that Lamar gives you. However, we saw that floor last year and it wasn't very exciting. Many of you probably lost a lot of games because of it. I will say that he has never had a season over 401 passing attempts or 265 completions, which makes me concerned. But Travis does believe that, and so does a lot of people out there, that he could potentially get better because of the weapons that he's throwing to. And so if he does do that, right, we'll talk about his weapons in just a second as far as the wide receivers go. But I do think that Lamar Jackson could potentially see a resurgence from what he had last year, right? He started to get it going at the end of last year. And so potentially he could maybe get back to a top 5 quarterback. Do I ever think he'll be that number 1 overall again? Unless he really corrects his passing ability, Travis, I don't know. I think he kind of took people from surprise his MVP year. And I don't know if they're going to, I think they kind of expect it now.
I just love the value right now that we're getting on Lamar, because a lot of people are believing that he is not a good quarterback in the NFL, and that's going to affect his ADP. And right now, if you go to 4for4.com, expert consensus ADP, you got Pat Mahomes at QB1, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, then Lamar Jackson, who's at 411, basically the 5th round in 12-team leagues. I'll take that value at a guy, you said basically you don't think he can be QB1. I think anybody who rushes like that, which is league-changing rushing upside in fantasy football, can be QB1. And I think just based on the rushing alone, and I think you're not asking him to be Patrick Mahomes with the ball through the air or Aaron Rodgers or something like that. I'm just asking him to have a little bit more better of a touchdown rate, get a little bit closer to his astronomical MVP touchdown rate of like 8 that he had 2 years ago. I don't need him to be world beater in the passing category. I just need him to continue to do what he does with his legs and continue to be, that Konami code, as you mentioned. And I think he's got a real shot, and we're going to talk about the weapons. But Johnny, first we got to talk about the running backs, because as we've stated so many times on this show, Lamar does demand so much of the rushing market share, which actually does kind of take away from upside of a J.K. Dobbins or even a Gus Edwards. And Gus Edwards doing enough of taking away from J.K. Dobbins' upside as well. So talk to me a little bit about the backs and how you're seeing this shake out for 2021.
Yeah, so J.K. Dobbins is a huge player that a lot of fantasy players are looking at this year, right? His ADP has ballooned all the way to the 2nd round. We've had many discussions on this show whether or not it should be there. Let's look at what we do know, right? We do know that Baltimore had 555 rushing attempts last year for over 3,000 yards. We just said how significant that was number 1 in the league. Now, J.K. Dobbins, where does he fit in that pie, right? Because we do know that this is kind of a 3-headed running back system, even though Lamar is a quarterback. 28% of the market share belongs to Lamar Jackson and his rushing. You look at Dobbins, he had 134 carries last year, which actually ranked 3rd in the running back depth chart behind Jackson and Gus Edwards. Now, a lot of people think that because Mark Ingram is now gone, that, okay, this is why it frees up Dobbins and gives him all those carries in order to push him to that 2nd round and make him that breakout running back that we kind of thought we saw last year, right? And the only problem is that, Mark Ingram wasn't playing a lot last year. He actually didn't get a whole lot of carries. He only saw about 13% of this team's rushing share, which was about 72 carries. Now, sure, is Dobbins going to get some of that? I do believe so. Will he get all of that? I would highly doubt that. Now, Dobbins is extremely efficient, Travis. I'll give him that hands down. He had over 6 yards per carry. He's very electric. That goes back to college. So you do have that. He's very, very electric. But when you're looking at a couple of the minute details on what can he really return, right? You look at the red zone area in particular, because touchdowns are what are going to really put that running back over that, that hump into a very solid RB2 or that, what we all want, that RB1, right? Well, he only got 28% of the red zone rushing shares last year, or the red zone touches. And when you look even closer, so that's from the 20-yard to the, to the goal line, right? But if you look at the goal line, he only had 6 goal line carries. Why is that important? Well, when you look at Gus Bus last year had 8 goal line carries. Now, Mark Ingram only had 1. So could J.K. Dobbins, in theory, and could they have a lot more goal line rushing attempts because of the added weapons? Sure. But it is very interesting to note, Travis, that J.K. Dobbins actually wasn't the main goal line carrier. It was actually Gus Bus. And I think that, and we'll talk about Gus Bus in just a second, but I think that he's actually the more extreme value, the guy that I'll probably have in a lot more leagues this year, because I don't want to pay that high draft capital for Dobbins. I do realize that it's definitely there for him to get it, right? Those numbers are pretty nice. However, there's a lot of limitations and a lot of what ifs in there. And I'm not a what if kind of guy. I like to go with what I know and what I can kind of project more easily, quote unquote. And so I'm really worried about Dobbins, but I know that you're on the opposite side of this. I know that you do see the glass a little bit more half full.
So ARC is coming in here. Austin, you see him on our mock drafts. You'll see him tonight with Club FFL. Says Dobbins is great. His situation is not. Matt coming in saying, we need people like Johnny to keep pushing those ADPs down so I can snag Lamar and Dobbins for cheap.
I'll do my best. I
think Lamar's ADP is coming down, which is real nice. Dobbins actually end of the third now, based on some of the stuff we've been hearing and talking about. These are getting into the areas where you take a second look. And I would agree with you, though. I think that Dobbins' situation, and Austin, I think the Dobbins situation is not fantastic. You know, when I'm looking at a situation like Cam Akers or DeAndre Swift, I like those situations a whole lot more, even though the rushing pie is a whole lot more in Baltimore because, as you talked about with Lamar getting so much of that, and even Gus Edwards. Briefly run down what you think Gus Edwards, because right now going in the 11th looks like a real big steal for people if they can get him. No Mark Ingram. And then if Dobbins does kind of falter a little bit, you're looking at maybe having a guy in the 11th who ends up being, RB2, RB3 value.
And I understand why his value is so low, Travis, because of where he finished last year. It wasn't anything super sexy. RB28 in standard, RB37 in PPR. He did only have 14 targets last year, which was double what he had the prior year, which is cool. But 144 carries isn't super sexy. But Gus Bus he's just productive. He is just a productive running back that just goes, north and south. And that's what they like. And that's why they put him on the field. He did see 24% of the team's market share, like we said before, 6 rushing touchdowns last year. You could say, hey, that's a little bit fluky. I don't think he gets that many. Well, like we said, he had 27% of the red zone carries and 8 goal line carries, which led the team for the actual running backs. That was actually 14th in the league as well. So I do think you look at Gus Bus and his history. He's averaged over 5.2 per carry his career and over 700 yards rushing per season. I think that's the floor that he gets. And if you're able to get him in the 11th, maybe his stock goes up a little bit more because I'm talking about him here. And you have to get him in the 9th, 8th. I think as long as you're like 9th, 10th, as that RB4, RB5, on your bench, I think that's great.
Yeah, I think there's extreme value in Gus Edwards, and I think there's value. We talk about this all the time, passing on the more expensive back in an ambiguous backfield. I don't know how ambiguous this backfield will be with them drafting. Remember J.K. Dobbins' draft capital was in the 2nd round, I believe, last year where they got him. So they definitely want to use him. It's just, will he be the guy? Because they've also had great success with Gus Edwards. All right, it's time to talk about the pass catchers here. We have 3 big names to really discuss. Rashad Bateman, the newly drafted wide receiver. Marquise Brown, who dominated targets last year. And then, of course, Mark Andrews, which is how Lamar Jackson butters his bread. Johnny, when you broke down these guys, obviously it starts with Mark Andrews at the top of the food chain. Are you in the camp? There seems to be 2 camps going on here. There's the Rashad Bateman is going to help Lamar Jackson and ultimately help guys like Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. Well, Rashad Bateman went to the worst possible landing spot, and there's nothing that you can do to change what's going on. Based on the way you feel about Lamar Jackson, I have an inkling on where you're going to go with this. But what did you see when you're kind of looking at some of the numbers?
For this year, for redraft purposes only, I am only interested in Mark Andrews as far as a pass catcher. I think his value is just right. I think of what he can get you in the upside paired with that value is there. And I'm interested in Mark Andrews. He had a down year last year, but he still had 88 targets, 58 catches for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. For a tight end, that's pretty good. He finished as a tight end 4. In standard, tight end 6 in PPR. He was seeing 24% of this team's market share, Travis, which I don't think that necessarily goes down when you add a guy like Rashad Bateman, because yes, I do think Rashad Bateman will be the alpha, right? He's built that way. He's 6 feet, 190, and he's seen the alpha target kind of market share in college. So I do think that that's what they want him to do. But I do tend to believe that for this year, I don't think he's going to be like the Stephon Diggs, because Stephon Diggs is he's a pros pro. Everyone, talked about his work ethic and how great he was at route running. And that, I think, is what helped, Josh Allen. Now, I'm not saying that, excuse me, I'm not saying that can't ultimately happen a couple of years down the road, because I do think Bateman is that talented of a receiver, but I don't think that he will be valuable this year. And then, Marquise Brown, you look at what his upside was. The best part of Lamar Jackson's season last year, Travis, he was a wide receiver, 13 in target share with 25%. And he still only finished, at the height of that, week 12 to week 17 as wide receiver 14 and half point PPR. So that causes me some concern. And I think that they'll both kind of eat into each other, Bateman and Brown. And so for that reason, like the Shark Tank says, I'm out on these guys. But I do think Mark Andrews will benefit him by having another pass catcher on the outside, draw attention from.
The law of averages would say, like, if Baltimore is going to improve, they're going to probably improve in one or the other, like rushing ability, spreading that wealth around, or passing ability and spreading that. I doubt that they're going to be able to not only get J.K. Dobbins more involved and make him more fantasy relevant, but also do that with Marquise Brown, right, or Rashad Bateman. So there's just not a lot there, I think, off the bone. I think Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews are the guys you can smash right now at ADP, and I think that we got to look at other ways to get value out of them. Now, if these guys fall around or so later, I love Marquise Brown. I would love for him to work. He's not an alpha wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Now, will Bateman do enough over the middle to get Marquise, unbracketed? Sure, that could happen. I think he'll be fine as a bench wide receiver 4 or 5, maybe even a 6, that you can win weeks with. But that's, for me, it's just too much basically where he's going at this point. All right, well, we're going to move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, which got some great news this week, Johnny. Joe Burrow, who is their franchise quarterback, was announced by Adam Schefter that the Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, who underwent reconstructive left knee surgery in December, is all systems go for the September 12th regular season opener against the Vikings, according to Dr. Neil Elarchi. I don't really know for sure if that's how it's pronounced, but I know he's a well-known doctor. I just don't know his name. Either way, Schefter saying all systems go. This looks good for Burrow, who was QB 18 in points per game last year with 17.4, averaged 40 attempts, was on pace for 4,000 yards last season. And I think the biggest question for me, Johnny, is Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase coming into this offense fully healthy with hopefully an improved line. They didn't do a lot early in the draft, but they did go later in the draft to improve the line. They have a couple first-round picks stacked from years past. Is that enough to get you excited about Burrow? Because remember, we had a couple games where he hit it for you in fantasy, but he seems to be on that streamer capability and 2 QB capability more than like a guy like Herbert, who are drafting higher because he finished as a top 10 QB.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. We were so on Joe Burrow in the beginning, obviously before he got hurt, and then it was like, oh, we transferred all that love to Herbert. And then right now we're kind of in this kind of slump. I actually, call me crazy, Travis. This could be the take of the show. I don't know. I'm not trying to make it, but I actually, out of all the quarterbacks in this show that we're going to talk about, I think I'm most interested in Joe Burrow this year because of his value and the upside. You talked about the number of attempts. I don't see that going away. They're going to continue to throw the ball and chuck the ball all over the field. We know the background of this head coach. And so I am really interested in Joe Burrow, especially with the added weapons and the added offensive line. I think I'm really excited for this offense as a whole. And you just kind of have to pick and choose what values you like the most in this offense, because I think there are going to be several pieces in here, Travis. Then you're going to break them down here on which guys could actually be very beneficial for your fantasy team this year. But I think there could be quite a lot.
I want to start with Joe Mixon, right? Because Joe Mixon is the guy that's probably going to make this engine kind of turn, both for Joe Burrow and the offense in general. He only played in 6 games last season. He finished the RB 49, but if you looked at our points per game basis, he scored 13.1 points per game. That put him as RB 12, so still top 12 RB 1. Since he is top 10 in vacated carries from last year to this year, because Giovanni Bernard went and signed with the Buccaneers. Bengals OC Brian Callahan came out regarding Joe Mixon's workload and said he should be on the field for every down. Now, you look at Joe Mixon's injury history, he would argue with that because he hasn't been able to stay on the field for every down. But his current ADP, Johnny, is RB 15 coming off the board at 211. So for me, I do think if he can stay in this window, it's a nice sweet spot for him. If he can get pushed into the 3rd round, I love it. I'll smash that too. But I think that Joe Mixon just needs to be healthy. That's the biggest thing. And I'm not going to try and project injury, but this is a guy who has dealt with injuries even in college. So over his career, he has not been the model of health. And so you look at a guy like Joe Mixon, and it gets a little bit hazy injury-wise, but I do love that he's set up for so much volume in this offense. And this is an offense that's going to throw it all over the field. So his pass catching could be through the roof. I mean, he should set career highs in pass catching this year with Joe Burrow at the helm. But I want to bounce a little bit into the pass catchers, Johnny. I don't know if you had anything to add there on Mixon, but I just think he's appropriately priced at this point.
Yeah, all I was gonna say is I'm sorry for the ADP bump, Travis.
Yeah,
I've been over here, and you have as well. Jumping on that Joe Mixon bandwagon,
especially in the mocks, and we'll continue to see how that fluctuates. But Mixon's a guy that I think is probably pretty set where he's going right now.
Now I'm disappointed. I should have had the Joe Mixon jersey on the wall today. That's disappointing.
Yeah, you messed up. So, for that, I'm taking you off the screen. We're gonna talk a little bit about the pass catchers here. And so, obviously, no tight end really for them to discuss. A trio of talented wide receivers, though, for the Bengals. Jamar Chase, who they drafted in the 1st round this year. T. Higgins, who they drafted in the beginning of the 2nd last year. And then Tyler Boyd, who is your PPR maven, the guy that just continues to kind of do the dirty work of the offense. I want to start with Chase. I mean, obviously the first wide receiver taken off the board. He's now reunited with Joe Burrow. You look at AJ Green, Alex Erickson, John Ross, all leaving this offense. Most of that was AJ Green, but 126 vacated targets. Cincinnati averaging the 6th highest passing rate at 63%. And then you look at what Chase was able to do in college, 24 deep catches in 2019, which that was 10 more than any other player in his class. You've got T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd on the roster, and they're talented as well. That could limit the true upside ceiling of Chase because, like, a lot of people comparing Justin Jefferson to Chase because Jefferson, I think Chase is probably a better prospect, but Jefferson came into such a nice vacated target vacuum there. I don't think you're going to get exactly that because there's a lot more talent on the roster around Chase, but I am interested in Chase right now. He's a physical freak. He's definitely a generational talent as we've seen before, and he's got room to grow as a route runner, which is nice because his ceiling could get even higher. I think Chase is something special, though, Johnny, because we've never seen kind of a unicorn situation where a guy's going to come in, was a transcendent talent, played with another transcendent talent in college, and now gets reunited with that transcendent talent. And that team was top 15, top 10 in pass attempts. So there's a lot working in Jamar Chase's favor. So when we say that he's being overdrafted, which right now he is going very high, but is it kind of worth it? Are you buying in on some of this hype?
I'm not totally buying in on the hype. And, I've mentioned this a couple of times. I do want some shares of Jamar Chase because I do think he is very, very talented, especially like more so in like a keeper league or something like that. Because I think the future is more exciting than maybe this year. I am concerned that his hype might get a little bit too much, like you said, because of the Justin Jefferson, and that's what's really pulling up his value right now in some of those drafts. And like Travis, you're looking at some of the guys that he's going around, and it's a little baffling. I do tend to go with the other guys over Jamar Chase, but like I said, if you structure your team and you really want this piece in Jamar Chase, I do think there'll be production there because there are so many vacated targets. But again, as well, there's also a lot of talent on this wide receiver in this wide receiver group. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if we did cut him, expect more target share than what he actually did get.
Yeah, so the big thing here, you talked about the talent on the roster with him, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So both of them finished as wide receiver 28 in PPR, basically tied there. T. Higgins was wide receiver 28, though, in standard as well, because he had some good production as a compiler as well. He was top 30 in targets in 2020 with 108 was T. Higgins. Could and should be mostly unaffected, though, by Jamar Chase's addition, because we talked about those vacated targets, and A.J. Green had about 100 of those vacated targets himself. So Burrow was still able to spread the ball around. T. Higgins playing in all 16 games. His current ADP is 7 in the 7th round at 701, wide receiver 29. So you're kind of having to buy him at where he finished last year, but I guess it's buying into the fact that you think the ceiling is a little bit higher this year with the added weapons and Joe Burrow back healthy. If you're buying the progress continuing on T. Higgins, which I think he's a great prospect, I think he's done really well in the league, and I think he's going to provide a lot of stuff that people aren't talking about. As we talked about, we're not going to talk about a tight end for Cincinnati today. And that's because Drew Sample is just not somebody that Joe Burrow looked to a whole ton. And he looked to T. Higgins as the big body tight end guy and in the red zone. And I think that could be a big situation for T. Higgins where people aren't talking about enough. Yes, you could say that T. Higgins isn't as good as Jamar Chase, and I think he probably isn't as talented, but there might be some ways for him to still eat in this offense that I think are very beneficial to a guy like T. Higgins. And then Tyler Boyd. The story with Tyler Boyd is really PPR. I'm not interested in standard. We talked about the difference. He was wide receiver 28 in PPR and then wide receiver 39 in standard. So, and then you just look at like the difference between Andy Dalton and Joe Burrow. Burrow didn't need Boyd as a compiler because he was able to do things with other wide receivers in the offense, because Boyd went from averaging 9.25 targets to 5 points and 5.6 catches to 7 targets and 5 catches in 2020. I think Boyd is going to be mostly underwhelming in all but PPR formats as a wide receiver 3 or worse on most weeks. And he doesn't have much of a ceiling. He's going not that much further down the board than T. Higgins. I'd rather take T. Higgins where T. Higgins is going and hope for the upside than play the floor game at wide receiver 34 where Boyd is coming off the board. Because look at the guys going with him, Johnny, right now with Tyler Boyd, Juju Smith-Schuster, DJ Shark, Deebo Samuel, Devonta Smith. These are guys I'd rather take upside with than Tyler Boyd. I've just been passing a whole lot more on Boyd's sort of vanilla ADP or vanilla, style of play.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll second you on the T. Higgins and why I actually think that T. Higgins could be the best value of the wide receivers here. And that's because where he's going, you're paying what he produced last year, Travis. But if you just kind of take a snapshot of what could potentially happen with this offense with Jamar Chase coming in, let's presume Jamar Chase takes that number 1 alpha role, which I don't think is a far stretch from anybody, right? And then you would expect, the trickle down effect to go from there. And so I would presume that the targets that you were, that Tyler Boyd was seeing would then be pushed up the ladder, right, to T. Higgins, because he would be the wide receiver 2 there. And then Tyler Boyd's would be pushed down even further than that, because he's not going to be that second option in the wide receiver room. At least I don't project it that way. So with that being said, Travis, if you look at what T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd, the targets, right? He had several games where he was getting, 8, 11, 9 targets, right? But his yardage wasn't super great in a lot of those because he was more of like the, slot and underneath guy. But you look at what T. Higgins did now on very similar targets. And I mean, he's getting 8 targets and he's going over 50 yards more often times than not, whereas Tyler Boyd was under 50 yards. So the upside to me is much more significant for T. Higgins than it is for Tyler Boyd. And then as well as you're looking at that height, 6'4", 210, he's always going to be a threat in the red zone because of that. And for that reason, I am in on T. Higgins and I'm looking to get him in a lot of drafts this year.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of T. Higgins. I think that there are some leagues I'm going to have Jamar Chase because I think the juice is going to be worth the squeeze a little bit with Jamar Chase, just based on upside alone of an LSU wide receiver. And like we talked about with all that chemistry nonsense. We got 2 more teams to go through in the AFC North, but before we do, I want to talk to Whisper Nation because we're excited to debut our all-new TFW FFF chat on Discord. This message board is absolutely free to all of Whisper Nation, and it's going to include advice threads, content links, exclusive video clips. It's already a party going down right now. And there's a community in there dedicated to this incredible game of fantasy football, which we all love. Join us today by clicking that link that we just dropped in the chat, or by clicking the link in our Instagram bio, following that link to Discord. It's as easy as that. Can't wait to see y'all in the chat soon. And a lot of people can't wait to see what the Cleveland Browns are going to do, Johnny. And so you jumped all over wanting to talk about Cleveland today when we were doing the show notes. You wanted every part of this team. You are a known Baker lover and aficionado. So talk to me a little bit about this offense, because Baker down the stretch actually did heat up a little bit. Maybe not too hot in fantasy, but really got this offense going. And Kevin Stefanski wins Coach of the Year. This is a team that finally is cashing in on all the hype that we've been talking about for the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I know you chose to put some headphones on, Travis, but, word around town was we were saying Baker touchdown maker. That's what we were calling him, because he was just throwing tutties left and right. This offense really started to open up, and you really saw Baker Mayfield trust in this offense and really see how it could all work together. Now, a lot of people are going to look at, Baker Mayfield and this Cleveland Brown offense and say, oh, it's a heavy rushing offense. And so I don't necessarily want a part of it, because we're talking about how, Lamar Jackson, we're hesitant on him because that's a run first offense. But the difference is Baker is pretty accurate, much more accurate than Lamar Jackson, but he doesn't have that upside. So what I will say is that when you look at Baker Mayfield getting back OBJ, which, there are both sides of the argument that's saying, OBJ is actually a detriment to, Baker Mayfield. If you look at the stats, Baker Mayfield will argue the other and the opposite. And so will everyone on the team, because they understand what OBJ brings to this offense. But getting OBJ back, and you look at Baker Mayfield was 6th in the league last year, Travis, in deep ball completion at 46.6%. He jumped that up from 39.2% the prior year under one of your favorite head coaches there in Cleveland. And so I do think that Baker Mayfield will have a significant amount of games in which you can play him and he'll be a streamer. Do I think he should be an every week starter? No, I don't think that that's going to happen. But I do think that there'll be matchups, and we'll tell you which ones those are. So stick around on the show. Make sure you hit subscribe, hit that bell so you get notified whenever we go live. When we will tell you, hey, this is a good week to start Baker Mayfield. Hey, let him go. Let him sit on the waiver wire, because there is some upside depending on matchup. But this is don't get it twisted, Travis. This is all about the running backs. This team.
Yeah, I think that, it's definitely a run first team, but I think that there is going to be some enticing options as far as where the ceiling is with the pass catchers and Baker. Like, can Baker get to that next level? He was drafted as the number 1 overall quarterback. Can he ever hit that ceiling that they need? Because right now they feel like they basically like Kevin Stefanski coming from Minnesota, treating him very much like a Kirk Cousins, a run game that complements his stuff. So for me, I don't know if we're there yet, but we could see it this year. I mean, it could definitely come through this year. I want to talk a little bit about those running backs, though, Johnny. You talked about it. This is where the meat and potatoes of this offense is, and that's with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb going rightfully so in the first round. We've talked about if that's too high, too low for ad nauseum. But how do you feel about this breaking down, and how good is Nick Chubb?
The answer is always it's too low, no matter where. Even if you get him at the 101, too low. No, I'm a big fan of Nick Chubb. I do think he is a steal in this year's draft, even though he is going in the first round. He's still not being selected as a top 3 running back, which is where I have him. You look at what he has done over his career. You know me. I love consistency. I love guys who continue to produce, and Nick Chubb follows that suit. He's he's one of 2 players in the league that has had 3,500 rushing yards and 25 touchdowns since 2018. I'm pretty sure you can guess the other one. And you look at what Nick Chubb does on pass blocking. He is a very, very good pass blocker, which keeps him on the field. 102 snaps as a pass blocker. During that time, only 4 QB pressures. He's a big guy. He's a thick guy, Travis. I don't know if you knew that.
2 C's.
And just to cap it off, I mean, if all that stuff wasn't tantalizing enough, you look at this rushing offense and what they do. Well, guess who's had the most 100-yard rushing games since 2019? Well, it's not Nick Chubb.
Derrick Henry.
So it is Derrick Henry. I was trying to get Whisper Nation on that one. But second is Nick Chubb with 13, tied with Dalvin Cook, who is arguably going as the 101 right now, Dalvin Cook. And Derrick Henry is also, in general, going above Nick Chubb, which I do think is a little bit of a travesty considering how much this team runs the ball and how much Nick Chubb is used. I do understand the whole side of the Kareem Hunt. I'll talk about him right now and whether or not, that's everyone talks about the reverse side of the coin, right? They're like, oh, Kareem Hunt, we like to get him because if Nick Chubb goes down like we saw last year, then you have an RB1 potential running back that you got in the 6th round. Well, why can't I flip that coin and say, well, what if Kareem Hunt gets injured? Then what can you expect from Nick Chubb? And that's where it gets exciting. And that's where it really becomes, he could be the number 1 overall running back in the league because he's already efficient enough from the rushing side. If you give him more targets, which he can catch, we saw that last year, then that's where his number 1 overall stock could be. And that's why I like Nick Chubb. But Kareem Hunt, you look at what he does. This is why I really think Kareem Hunt, Travis, is a very good value no matter where you're at in drafts, PPR, standard, whatever you are. I think Kareem Hunt is being slept on because people know what he is. He's not a mystery box. And I think you could take advantage of that. You saw 48% opportunity share in this offense. Well, what does that garner, right? 198 carries, Travis, as an RB2. There are RB1s in this league that's what they get, and they're the workhorse for their team. They get 198 carries. Then you add on the touches the receptions, right? He had 51 targets, 38 receptions. So you're looking at a guy who's getting 230 touches. And what do we like? We like opportunities. He's also getting opportunity in the red zone, which he was 11th in the league with 48 red zone touches. Here's the deal with Kareem Hunt. They use Nick Chubb they put him in for 2 rotations, and then they'll bring in Kareem Hunt for that 3rd one, and he is the every down back on that 3rd one. This was able to allow him to average 12.63 points per game on average, Travis, on a half-point PPR with Nick Chubb. And then when you take Nick Chubb out, which is the upside, it actually doesn't get too significantly better for Kareem Hunt. Surprisingly, he just went to a 13.72 points per game average. So about 1 point per average difference with Nick Chubb. So that's ultimately why I do think that Kareem Hunt is such a great value, because most people think he only has value if Kareem Hunt or if Nick Chubb goes down, but and I'm here to tell you he doesn't. He has very good
so
value.
many weeks last year you could have been starting both of them and just be extremely happy. And I just think this is an offense that when we're looking at it on paper, it's rinse and repeat. We know what they want to do, and they're really good at it. Austin coming in here calling Baker the creator. Yes, that's exactly what he does. He creates for this offense to run the ball some more, and that's what they want to continue to do. We know, I think, that basically they're set it and forget it with some guys this year, and I think Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are on that set it and forget it. Like, you're drafting Chubb, find where he's going, and if you like him in the top 5 and that's your guy, then take him there, because the opportunity is through the roof. And as Johnny pointed out astutely, nobody talks about how if Chubb were to go, everybody talks about if Chubb goes down, Kareem Hunt's an RB1. What about if Chubb stays healthy and Kareem Hunt goes down? I mean, that's an awesome situation to be in as a Chubb owner, Chubb truther. Not so much for Kareem Hunt. We don't wish injury on anybody. The pass catchers, Johnny, quickly, we got to talk about OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, and then, of course, Austin Hooper. We saw some things happen last year with, obviously, OBJ out yet again. Look, tell me if you've heard this before since OBJ's come to Cleveland. We're excited about OBJ. We think he's a discount of his ADP, and we think that there's a real potential for this guy to get back to that really awesome upside that he had before. How are you feeling about that statement when we talk about OBJ?
I do think ultimately, Travis, OBJ is kind of the only pass catcher that I'm actually interested in for Cleveland. We did talk about how this was a run-heavy team. I do believe Baker Mayfield will be able to, get the ball down the field. He'll be more efficient, more evolved. But I like you, really doubt the true upside on a week-to-week basis that you could get from these wide receivers. And so I do think because of OBJ's ceiling, what we have seen in the past, granted that was when he was younger and way healthy, we have seen him though be a wide receiver 2. We've seen him be a wide receiver 1. And I do think in this offense, at least one receiver will somewhat feast and be startable. And so I do think OBJ would be that guy. And his ADP right now is very nice. He's getting, you're getting that discount, right? Because he's coming off an injury, but everything is pointing towards he should be ready. He's on pace to make the season. And then you're looking at, like we said, the deep ball targets from Baker Mayfield, how much he improved. And then you look at OBJ 2 years ago when he had a full season, number 2 in the league in deep ball targets, Travis, and still averaging 22.3 target market share. So I think OBJ is ultimately the only guy I'm interested in because, you look at Jarvis Landry, even with OBJ out, he finished as a PPR wide receiver 33, wide receiver 36 in standard. He had a 26.3% target market rate, and I just don't see that repeating. He only had 5 games over 60 receiving yards, so he was definitely relying on touchdowns towards the end of the season, and it's too inconsistent for me, and I don't know if the production is going to be there to back that up. So I would actually pass on Jarvis Landry this year in all drafts. Maybe in a PPR league if you get him deep enough, but that's about it. And then, touching real quick on Rashard Higgins, Austin Hooper to wrap them up. Rashard Higgins not interested unless something were to happen to OBJ. And even then it's just a spot start, if that, a streamer. And then Austin Hooper, very, very much a disappointment. I mean, he was like the number 1 paid tight end last year, and he only saw 5 games over 6 targets. He only topped 50 receiving yards 3 times in those games. So I am not interested in Austin Hooper this year at all. That's all I got to say about the Cleveland Browns.
The Browns, man, really led by that running game. We know that. But OBJ going, like as Johnny said there, in the 6th round, end of the 6th or middle of the 6th, as wide receiver 27. I will take that just on the upside alone. I think as your 3rd, 4th wide receiver, you're okay with that kind of value for the upside that could be there as the number 1. I mean, you think about play action with OBJ, if he's fully healthy, is going to be something to watch by football standards. All right, the Pittsburgh Steelers round us out for the AFC North. They won the division last year. Obviously have some weapons in the wide receiver room, but they have since the inception of, basically since I've been born, the Steelers have been drafting wide receivers well. But the man throwing them the ball is Ben Roethlisberger, and he had a ho-hum last year coming back from that elbow surgery, was QB 14 in overall and in points per game last year. You looked at his yards per attempt, 6.3. That was a career low in any season that he has started more than 13 games. It also ranked 32nd among QBs last year. He still was able to rack up 33 touchdowns. That was 8th in the NFL. And you see some room for growth if he was able to kind of get connected, because he was 9th in air yards with 4,338 last year, and 3rd in deep ball attempts with 72, 3rd in overall attempts with 608. So there is room to grow for Big Ben. You just got to hope. This is going to be a theme for these wide receivers when I get into them, and for Big Ben, Johnny. And that's that you're either in one camp. You think that what you saw out of Big Ben last year meant that he was done, that the elbow is toast, and he can't get it together, or you think that was his first year back from a serious surgery, and that he's going to correct back to his mean of being able to push the ball down the field and stay accurate. The one thing I say for the people that believe in Big Ben truthers, is that he was still able to push the ball down the field. Like, he got it down there. He just wasn't very accurate when he did. It's not like we're watching Drew Brees throw it down the field and he just can't get it there, or Phillip Rivers in that case. I think that there's something. Yeah. I think that there are some causes for optimism with Big Ben, and I think that will play into what we talk about when we talk the pass catchers. I'm interested to see what you think on Big Ben, or if you thought you're going to see more of what we saw last year.
I think we will see a little bit more of what we saw last year. Well, and to pair with that, I think they'll run the ball a little bit more. Now they have Najee, and they want to use him, kind of as an all-purpose weapon as well. I think that will help Big Ben. It'll give him a little bit more time. That was oftentimes the reason why it was hard for him to connect down, with the deep ball, was because he really didn't. That offensive line wasn't giving him a lot of time. So if that can get created, if he can shore up that offensive line, I do think that there could be some streamable starts for Big Ben. I would much prefer, if he's my, quarterback 2, if I'm in a super flex league, I think that's okay. I'm not super excited about it, but I'd probably be more excited about that than Carson Wentz in Indiana, to be honest with you. So I do see there's some being upside because of these weapons that you're going to talk about right now, Travis.
Yeah, I want to start with Najee Harris. You mentioned the line there, and I think that's such a big part of the take when we look at Najee Harris. Obviously, 24th pick, they used their next 3 after that on linemen because, as Johnny stated, that line was bad. It was 17th ranked in PFF last year. Now they're not going to have Pouncey, Villanueva, or Matt Failure. So really, unless these guys that come in are going to step right into it, we could be looking at a bottom quarter, top 5 worst offensive lines in the league. And then you've got to talk about Najee Harris, who obviously gets the comps to Joe Mixon and Forte, caught more balls in every previous season over the last 2 years, including 43 last year at Alabama. You look at what Connor was taking with him when he left this team, 45% of the rushing market share and 7% of the target market share. But I just look at Pittsburgh as a whole. Bottom 5 in rushing attempts, in yards, in rushing touchdowns. Bottom 6 in targets to the running back position. Worst team in the NFL last year in yards per attempt. You think that there's room for improvement, but is Najee Harris going to be enough behind a line that could get even worse? Pittsburgh, 26 points per game last year. That was 12th best. So you could see that there's some points there to be had in the running game. I just think on volume alone, he's going to be fine. You should get him, but I think he's going to struggle quite a bit behind that line. And I think you could be sitting here with a guy that, the hype is real right now. He's going in the 3rd round already on Fantasy 4for4 consensus ADP as the RB14. I don't know if I'm going to be willing to draft him there. I think there's guys with more upside, guys with better situations. But as far as volume goes, nobody's got really better guaranteed volume right now, except for maybe Mike Davis. And this is a guy who's probably way more talented than Mike Davis, right? So I think Najee Harris is fine. I think if that's your guy, I love the talent. I think it's all there. He just wasn't, like people keep saying, what I keep hearing from guys that I really respect as scouts, he wasn't a guy that blew you off the tape. He was just the best guy in this draft class for running backs. And he went to a team that has a lot of volume up for grabs,
Where I seem to really like Najee is, yes, I understand that there are a lot of questions about that offensive line and whether or not it's going to be better or worse. But here's what I do like. Even with it as bad as it was last year, they still had 10 rushing touchdowns between James Conner and Snell. There was 10 rushing touchdowns for this offense. And I have to believe that they're not going to let Benny Snell be the goal line back anymore, that they're going to give that to Najee. And so you're telling me that there's an upside of 10 touchdowns, if not more. I know that Ryan Weiss, who comes on our show in Club Fantasy FFL, he brings this up too. He believes that there'll be more PI because, like we said, if there is more time for Big Ben to throw down the field, and they get PI, then all of a sudden that opportunity of just 10 rushing touchdowns could be, 15, 20. I'm not saying 20, it'll get there, but I'm just saying the opportunities could open up even more. And that could be where he gets, the bulk of his stuff, because maybe he ends up getting 14 rushing touchdowns. And yeah, maybe his rushing totals are mediocre, but that paired with the fact that he will also probably receive out of the backfield and then the touchdown upside, I could see why people are intrigued. And I'll be honest, I'll probably have him on a couple of leagues of mine because I do think that he is a good running back. Now, is he the greatest? No, but we've seen this before. You don't have to be the greatest running back in order to produce in the NFL. You just have to have the right amount of opportunities. And I think that that is what I'm banking on.
Let me ask you this, because I think it's just going to come down to your personal preference with these guys. If we're looking at the guys going around Najee Harris right now, Antonio Gibson goes behind him, Miles Sanders, CEH, David Montgomery even further down. All those guys, for me, I think I'm taking above Najee. But you like Najee more than those guys?
Not all of those guys. I like David Montgomery more. I like CEH a little bit more because they have fixed that offensive line. It is a better offense. But I do think that there is I like him more than Miles Sanders because I don't know what the Philadelphia, I do have some trust. I do like Hurts and things like that. But I'm a little concerned with Sanders, and what he can produce, as opposed to, Najee, who's looking to go. So that's kind of my sweet spot right there. I'm not trying to overpay for him, but and I would even say this, I would rather have Najee than J.K. Dobbins. So that's kind of where I'm at. So
I think that's a fine volume alone is just going to make him push the needle for me on that one for sure. I want to talk about these pass catchers because that's really the big stars of of Pittsburgh right now at the moment. Even though Ben, we're not sure about the elbow. We look at these guys, this trio: Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool. I'll start with Deontay, wide receiver 26 in standard, and then the 21st wide receiver in PPR last year. Led the team in target market share with 24%. His 144 targets last year, Johnny, that was sixth most among wide receivers. So people ask, well, why didn't he finish higher? Because if you're top 6 in targets, what's going on? He had a 61% catch rate. That was outside the top 50 among pass catchers. So I think whatever you got to buy here, you got to buy that another year with Ben and Ben recovering from that elbow injury could spell big things for him. But right now his ADP is at wide receiver 21, where he finished in PPR and is in the 5th round. And I'm just looking at some of what's going on with this offense and some of the other pieces, and I think I'm passing on Deontay. So we'll start with Juju Smith-Schuster. Am I passing for Juju? I don't know. He had a very strange year. Juju had career lows in yards per target with 6.49, but a career high in touchdowns with 9. Second highest total as a Steeler in targets with 128, but then his second lowest yard total as a Steeler with 831. He's got a strange team-friendly one-year deal, was 15th in targets and 25th in fantasy points. Was the wide receiver 31 off the board currently in the 7th round. And I'm not going to buy him there because I think that's probably about where the 9 touchdowns is the one for me, Johnny, with Juju, because it just means to me that he had to live off those 9 touchdowns to get his nut, so to speak. But for me, I really have just been warming so much up on Chase Claypool, and I'll tell you why. He was the wide receiver 16 in standard, wide receiver 24 in PPR, had 109 targets, so the least amount of targets of the 3 wide receivers we're going to talk about. Was 25th at the position, though, and so similar to guys like Adam Thielen and Mike Evans. You look at what PFF compares him to Brandon Marshall. We talked about touchdowns with Juju. He was 9 touchdowns as well, or he got 9 touchdowns as well. That was 8th among wide receivers. But the big one for me, 3rd in deep targets, Johnny. This guy gets down the field, 31 deep targets last year, 3rd in the NFL. 9th in air yards with 1,448. And this one is the big one for ceiling when we talk about ceiling. Unrealized air yards was 921. That was 4th most among wide receivers last year. So much to like with Claypool, but so much like Deontay Johnson. Are we buying a better year out of Ben? If so, Claypool is the one to buy a lot of because Claypool is the furthest down on the ADP. He's the most upside as far as a physical specimen. And he gets down the field the most out of these guys and has a better catch rate than Deontay and looks to be a better prospect than Juju. I just think Claypool is the guy that's sneakily the guy you want to smash out of the 3 wide receivers.
Yeah, I think that Claypool is the guy that I really want in this offense as far as ADP. If I could choose, the price is right. Bob, if I could do that, then I would say, yeah, give it for Chase Claypool, because I do think that his price is
6th round, Johnny, as wide receiver 30 right now.
Yeah,
I think that's a great buy for me.
I am okay with it because, if it ends up, here's the concern and why I do believe he's going as like that third guy, because if it is true that Big Ben's elbow is, out and done, then Chase is the one that's most affected by that, right? And so there is much more of a gamble on, on why you would want to get Chase Claypool. And so that's why his ADP is where it's at. Now, Deontay, where you were talking about, and why I think I'm still okay with paying where he's going at ADP, depending, of course, who's on the board. There might be guys that I might like slightly ahead of him, right? But I do think that I would, especially in a PPR, because I do know that even if Big Ben's elbow is trash, that there's one guy that I do know won't be affected by that, and that's Deontay, because Deontay runs a lot of the underneath, the quick slants, and we've seen guys.
But you could argue he was affected by it with 61% catch percentage last year, and not huge yards per target either.
The problem, I think, again, if we have to remember, he was having like major drop problems, and he was majorly in his head in the beginning of the season. And it wasn't because like he had a 61% catch rate, but a lot of those were like, I think he led the league in drops, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think, they talked to him.
You're not helping with that's not helping his case to lead the league in drops.
No. What you saw, though, that was like in the beginning of the season. What you saw through the rest of the season, though, is Deontay really started to get his confidence, which Big Ben knew how to do, right? Talk him up, and he started to get that confidence back, right? And so that's where he went on that tear. He was like a wide receiver 2 down the stretch. He's getting all those massive targets. I don't see the targets going away, even if Big Ben's elbow craps the bed. And so that's why I think I'm still okay with Deontay. With the Juju, I'm just, he's that in-between guy. There's so many weird things going on with Juju that I just don't, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm just out on it.
I think too much of it was the touchdowns for me with Juju, where you got, he had nearly 40, 50 more targets than Claypool, and Claypool still got the 9 touchdowns. So that's what I like about Claypool, is Claypool seems to be a guy who can be more versatile. I think that Claypool is what they want Deontay to be, or they wanted Deontay to be last year. And I think Claypool will come into his own. And I'm just going to bet on talent alone and size and speed with wide receivers. And that's why I'm really a big fan of Claypool over Deontay Johnson. Just touching quickly on Eric Ebron, because he was the tight end 15 last year in PPR and standard. He's now going to compete for targets, though, because the Steelers drafted Pat Freiermuth. Only 2 games last year did he have double-digit targets. I'm avoiding Ebron, and I'd rather bet on one of these wide receivers that we're talking about, or maybe 2 of these wide receivers to come through with more target share than I would Eric Ebron. So that kind of does it for me. But Whisper Nation, we want to know what you think out of the AFC North. Who's one of your favorite steals, your favorite busts projected for this year out of that AFC North? And just join us Friday, because we'll be going over the AFC East with Joe Zolo from Club Fantasy FFL. Johnny and Joe will be holding that down there. And you guys, in just about an hour, right, Johnny, we're going to be coming on with Club Fantasy FFL. So make sure you guys are checking that out over on Facebook and YouTube. We'll be streaming live with them with a mock draft. Johnny, any final words for Whisper Nation after this AFC North show?
I sure do. Let's go Golden State. We need you to win, baby. We need you to win, baby. Suns, we don't want to play you guys first round.
Just a little basketball talk. There seems to be a lot of positioning and moving around in these playoff games. So, Johnny, as a Suns fan, obviously Whisper Nation knows I'm a Lakers fan out here in LA. You really want to avoid the Lakers first round, huh?
Yeah, I do. I want you guys to lose by somebody else, either the Clippers or Utah. I don't want to play you guys. I don't want to do that.
Makes
but
sense.
If we have to, we will. But I would rather see. I've never been a bigger Golden State Warriors fan than I will be tonight. So I'm sorry, Travis.
We'll see Steph Curry playing out of his freaking mind. So we will see what the Lakers have to do, throwing all these different bodies at him, and then of course LeBron's ankle. Gonna be a lot of fun. Been a lot of fun with you guys, Whisper Nation. Hit us up in the chat. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll be going live here in just under an hour with the boys from Club Fantasy FFL. I think their link's in our description, right, Johnny?
Yeah, not in our. They are a channel. They're in our favorite channel. Favorite
make sure you
football
guys
channel.
hit up favorite channels and check it out there. We'll be going live with them in just under an hour. For Johnny Game Time Hicks, I'm Big Travie. We are the Fantasy Whisperers. We'll see you Friday. Peace.
Peace. Appreciate you, Whisper Nation.
Right here.
Oh, hey, you made it to the end of the video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and hit subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified anytime we drop new content or go live. And if you're still not sold yet, check out one of these videos.